were loaded. It remained that, a rumor. Sometimes an uncle checked in, but otherwise the boy was on his own. "First, Ryan opens his presents," my dad said. I didn't mind. Ryan and I did most things together. A few days before, we'd shaved each other's heads to cement our pact that when we grew up, I'd be a Marine and he'd be a fighter pilot. People said we looked even more alike then. Two peewees ripe with baby fat, grinning milk-teeth ramparts, our pale scalps shining. Ryan tore at his favors. Inside, model planes, an F-14 and an F-16. They were brushed steel, weighty and detailed. He scaled them with flat palms, unblinking. Then my father started the parade of gifts for me. He loved this. He'd leave the kitchen and walk back in theatrically, bringing with him old ammunition boxes and camo gear he'd bought at a surplus store he referred to as Earl's House of Crap. My favorite, and the one I put on right away, was an olive t-shirt featuring a hideously grinning death's head. The skull had feathered wings with tips that curled up, as though flexing, and a streamer behind it that read, "Airborne, Death from Above." More gifts followed. MREs, a compass, a canteen, before the grand finale, the Marine Corps Common Skills Handbook. He's a small man, my father, about 5'4" and thickly built. He likes to joke that they only admitted him into Vietnam because he stuck lollipops under his heels. He seldom wears a shirt, and the sun has cured his skin poreless. His head's horseshoe bald, with one tendril of gray-brown hair lying across it. Until he gets upset, whereupon it falls next to his face and flails, always a step behind, like a gymnast's ribbon. His gray eyes are very nearsighted. When he joined the Navy ROTC at Vanderbilt University, he had to memorize the eye chart beforehand to pass. By the time of his honorable discharge, he ranked a junior lieutenant. He captained the swift boat that would later become John Kerry's. His orders were to stand apart, and instead of a weapon, wield his men like materiel. My father never did weigh the pros and cons of becoming a sailor. In his time, service was expected of every young man, especially so in our tribe. After Papa Lou passed away, my father went through Lou's cache of genealogical documents and found the records of one paterfamilias Russell, officer in the Continental Army, the Little Iron Man, his affectionate sobriquet. So, my wanting to be a Marine was no surprise to the men in my family. I'd simply understood what they had, that dress blues awaited. There was but a single mold for me to fit, like how biscuit honey has its bear. I chose the Marines because they were always the first to fight, and because they were a part of the Navy. Since I'd never been much of a boater or fisherman, I figured the Marines might make up for my deficiencies in the eyes of my father. My father, whose gift of their handbook made me giddy. I wanted to read it all right there. The table of contents seemed to me a delineation of the things I'd do later in life. I flipped through it with Ryan looking on and everyone else dicking around with the rest of the gear. It had charts and diagrams explaining things like how to identify a weapon of opportunity, what is the responsible use of force, and how to apply a splint to a fracture. I've kept it to this day, and I consult it often. After cake, the men stayed in the kitchen to drink, and we boys returned to the dining room to have our Nerf gun war. The dining room was perfect. At one end was a large entryway with 2 walls to take cover behind, and at the other was a carpeted 3-step staircase that made a serviceable trench. My mother threw a quilt over her crystal. Then it was on. I took command of the trench, and Ryan the walls. We rarely hit each other. When we did, nothing happened. Nobody died. Our war made more noise than sense. I stood to the side of the trench with my Nerf chain gun and belched foam arrows that drifted past the enemy in sad arcs. I would never notice Ryan until it was too late. Then I'd see half of his face poking around from behind the wall and thwunk, a dart right in the neck.